Hey everybody, John the Other here, obviously. And as you might be aware, I talk quite a bit about false accusations on this channel and how the media deals with them. In fact, how the media colludes with false accusations. But I want to posit or present to you a new theory of what's actually going on. And to do that, I need to talk about a couple of different cases, which I will start with going back all the way to 2013. The CBC reporting on a ruling in a false accusation case in which two Ontario women were ordered to pay their uncle $125,000 in damage for falsely accusing him of sexual assault. And I'll link the article in the low bar. It says, this will likely prevent other sexual assault victims from coming forward, advocates say. That's the standard line though, isn't it? Other sexual assault victims will be discouraged or prevented from coming forward. And this is the CBC, funded by your taxes, lying to you. The word other in front of sexual assault victims is the wrong word. The CBC and the writer of this article, a guy named Adam Carter, chose that word in order to make two women who made a false accusation into the same thing as two women who were actually sexually assaulted. The correct wording should have been, the judgment against the two will likely prevent real accusers from coming forward. And not, as the CBC typist stated, this will likely prevent other sexual assault victims from coming forward, the wording which falsely creates an impression that a person found guilty by a judge of making a fraudulent report against an innocent person is the same as and is morally equivalent to a person who suffers from a grievous sexual assault. Different article, this time in the UK, newspaper The Guardian. Writing about the rightfully acquitted Canadian radio host Jian Ghomeshi, that article outlines that each of the four accusers in Ghomeshi's first trial discredited themselves through a pantomime of open collusion and lying, which left the judge no way to give any weight or credibility to their other allegations. Link to that in the low bar. So Ghomeshi had to be acquitted. And after the fifth paragraph of that article, they include the following as a new paragraph, quote, those who work with sexual assault survivors say that Thursday's decision would have a chilling effect on victims' willingness to come forward. The court's decision to not convict when the only evidence was the testimony of complainants who had firmly established themselves in the court as liars and that apparently is going to discourage victims' willingness to come forward. Why? Isn't it only going to discourage liars from coming forward? Why does the author, Ashifa Kassam, writing for the Guardian newspaper, think that liars being caught lying will discourage actual victims? A victim of an assault and somebody who lies about being a victim for personal gain are not the same thing. Why do I need to point this out? More recently, and as was pointed out by Professor Janice Fiamengo, two University of Ottawa hockey players were correctly acquitted of an accused sexual assault that, after all the facts were known, turned out to be a fully consensual sexual encounter involving the accuser and each of the players in a situation where the female accuser may have been embarrassed by her own participation in ongoing hotel room sex. And right on schedule, in that article in the Canadian Press, we have feminist activist Julie Lalonde chiming in, quoting Lalonde from the Canadian Press. She says, every time we see a high-profile sex assault trial result in an acquittal, it sends women back 50 years. Now, aside from the stupidity of introducing Lalonde in this article as a women's rights advocate, her claim that a factually correct acquittal sets women back is of a piece with the standard feminist rhetoric we hear repeatedly almost every single time the triers of fact determine a man is not guilty in a sexual encounter that turned out not to be an assault. And I think the persistence of this rhetoric demands we examine its intent. So do we take the idea that feminists, who are invariably the people who make this argument, do we take the idea that they actually cannot distinguish between a fictional event and something that actually happened? Can it be true that feminists who now write the papers are either unable or unwilling to distinguish between imaginary fantasy and actual reality? Well, it's possible. Possibly. Now, another closely related possibility is that feminism now being taught, being reinforced, and I'll say being enforced, purposefully and willfully removes the conceptual distinction between a sexual violation and a lie or a fantasy told about a sexual violation that did not actually happen. This is obviously a much more constrained version of the proposed inability to tell the difference between reality and fantasy, but I have learned that feminists, even lowercase f feminists who do not identify themselves under that big F brand name, do not hear the word false when somebody pronounces the phrase false accusation. For them, the accusation is the verdict. And the entire grueling enterprise of a police investigation, the inquiry into facts, the canvassing of witness, the trip through the courts, all of that for them is nothing except an absurd and pointless obstruction to what they see as justice. Because if a woman says she's abused, then there is, in the mind of a feminist, no other possibility other than that is the entire truth. Do feminists actually think like this? Well, if we go with this possibility, then women, in the feminist mind, are actually not capable of lying. They are, deterministic, like machines telling only the truth, and, in fact, fail to meet the requirements of being a self-realized or a complete human being. Now, viewing women as if they are perfectly virtuous, never-lying automata is, in my view, demeaning and insulting to women. And although I am quite accustomed to being told I hate women, the feminists who attempt to instruct me on my own thoughts also seem to hold women in a much deeper and more profound contempt than I can even imagine sharing with them. But Julie Lalonde, who commented on the acquittal of University of Ottawa students, did not say the acquittal sets victims back. She said it sets women back 50 years. So I'm going to assume that Lalonde is at least rational enough to understand that women are as capable and as willing and as likely to lie as any other class of people, especially when incentivized. I've never met her, but I'll afford her the benefit of the doubt that she's not completely stupid. And revisiting Lalonde's statement, the expression set women back 50 years suggests to a casual listener a loss of civil rights for women in what she suggests for that comment. But of course, that understanding starts from an assumption that civil rights or human rights or equal rights or something like that is the field on which feminist activism plays. But that assumption, on which so much of the public's understanding rests, may be an incorrect assumption. So that setback of 50 years for women, as Lalonde suggests, may be progress along a path quite other than equality. In fact, it might be progress towards a social and legal standard in which female opinion is the law. She says she was assaulted. That is the law. Police conduct an investigation or gather evidence or interview witnesses and then make a recommendation to a prosecutor? No. That would be the old way. The new way is that the police and the courts function only as palace guards, and every woman is a monarch to command those guards. Some police forces seem already to be operating along a principle something like this. Toronto Police Services. I have my eye on you, palace guards and water carriers. So try to imagine, though, living in a world in which there is actually no law except what a woman says. And let's say, for simplicity, it's one woman. The Queen, for example. Except that rather than being a mostly political figurehead, she is legally all-powerful. Everything she says is the law. And if what she says changes from one day to the next, the new thing is always the law. And the old thing from yesterday, if it conflicts with what she said today, we must pretend she never said that. I think it would not be too much to say this would be a tyrannical monarchy tuned specifically to trample the civil rights of everybody except the Queen, if it was the Queen. But let's take this idea one step further. Rather than one monarch whose spoken word is the law, what if every woman was the law unto herself, and the role of the police and courts was to enforce whatever whimsical commands each sovereign female said out loud or tweeted or Instagrammed or whatever? And imagine this, remembering that women certainly compete with one another and very often hate one another. And it appears to me that this goal is the progress that Julie Lalonde and other feminist activists are working so hard to make real, and which apparently is set back 50 years when there's an acquittal of an innocent person in a court. A system in which half the human race are each laws unto themselves, to impress their will onto every other person around them by the use of a compliant and obedient system of courts and police. I can't actually imagine any nightmare or fictional dystopia anywhere in human literature or fantasy that comes anywhere close to this hell on earth. Not just for men, though, for everybody that feminists seem now to be working to create. Thank you very much for your kind attention. And as always, have a lovely, lovely day.